I'm going to go, and this is getting to be a bit crowded on here, so I'm actually going to do something that may throw you off a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this window in Visual Studio called Solution Explorer, which you probably have open on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'm just going to go to my project, Module 4, Working with Numbers, and I'm just going to go, I'm going to say Add a New Item, because I want to add a brand new file, because this one's just getting kind of cluttered with a lot of code in it. I want to start a fresh Python file, but I want to keep all my files together because they're all about this same chapter. So I'm going to go Add New Item, and I say Add an empty Python file, thank you. This is going to be my ask user for input. Choose Add. And now I actually have two files inside my project. And I can go back and forth between them by selecting the one I want to work on inside the Solution Explorer, or once I've opened them, there'll be tabs open at the top of the screen I can use to move back and forth. So what I'd like to do is ask a user for a value. I'm going to ask, let's see, salary equals input. Please enter your salary, right? Because we learned how to use the input statement to accept values from a user. And then we're going to have a bonus that you're going to receive for the year for your amazing work this year, Christopher. You're getting a big bonus.
Woohoo!
Please enter your bonus. And this is an awesome company because you get to type in your own bonus.
Wow.
I want to work at companies like that.
I need that.
Yeah. And then I'm going to say, then I'm going to have paycheck equals, or paycheck amount equals salary plus bonus. Make sense? Right? Your salary plus your bonus would be your total paycheck amount. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to print your paycheck amount. Oh, and I just caught myself. I almost got myself in trouble. I just noticed I have a lowercase c here and an uppercase c there. I know that Python's case sensitive, so I'm just going to copy and paste that variable name to make sure I type it the same. All right, now I run and it runs the other program.
Oh, that's not what we wanted.
That's not what I wanted. I created another file. I want to run my new file. Well, that's because when you have more than one file inside a project, there's always one which will run by default.
Doesn't know which one to run.
Yeah, it doesn't know which one to run. So it's still running the old one because it's still there. Now I can go here and I can say, start it. So I can run it by right-clicking on it and saying start without or start with debugging, and it will run my code. The other option is if you're going to be running it frequently, you can also right-click on that file and you can say set as startup file. And that'll change which one runs by default when you just press the F5 key or press the play button. I like doing that because usually I'm working on one file at a time and I just want it to run that one all the time while I'm testing. So I prefer to change the startup file option. So if we go back to Visual Studio, I right-click, I have set this as a startup file, so I right-clicked and chose Set Up Startup File. And now when I run, and I just realized I should have a space there, it'll be nicely formatted, it says, please enter your salary. Okay. All right, so I'm sure your salary must be at least $500, Christopher.
I think so.
And your bonus this year is going to be a whopping $75.
All right.
All right.
That's not bad.
And then it comes back and says my total paycheck amount will be $50,075.
Not for nothing. I kind of like that. I like that. That's new math. I like that math. That math worked out really well for me.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where you go, whoa, wait a second. What just happened here? How can 500 plus 75? Shouldn't that be 575? You would think.
Yes.
Right. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to try and show you what's doing. I'm actually going to try debugging. We haven't seen the debugger yet, but this is there will be times when you're going to need to see what's going on inside the code where you're going, well, why? My code ran, it didn't give me an error message, but the result's totally off. So you might want to see what's happening. One of the neat things you can do in Visual Studio is you can actually execute your code step by step, and as you go through the code, all those great variables you've set up, you can see what's inside the variables. And that's really powerful when you're trying to figure out what went wrong. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And I'm going to click in the margin here. And see that little red dot that appears in the corner? When I do that, that little red dot makes a breakpoint. So I can put it on different lines of code. I can make multiple breakpoints, and I can get rid of them just by clicking on them again. And when you put a breakpoint in the code, then you're telling Python, hey, or you're telling Visual Studio, hey, when this code runs and you get here, stop. I want to look around and see what the heck is going on. So I've got a breakpoint on the very first line of code because I don't know where it's blowing up. And I say run. And it flashes on the screen. You're like, hey, where's my screen? Ah, there's a hint over here in the corner. Let's go scroll over a little bit here. Try not to make you dizzy. See the little yellow arrow that we've got there? That yellow arrow on the red circle indicates you're about to execute this line of code. So what the debugger has done is said, you put a breakpoint here. You told me to stop when I got here. Well, I'm here. I've stopped. What do you want to do next? Oops, I did wrong control button. So when I have that breakpoint, whoops, wrong one. Apologies. I just hit the wrong function key there for a second.
The file.
Oh, file's running too. Okay, let's try this again. Run. Okay, so now here I am again. I'm at that first line of code it's about to execute. Now the neat thing is, when you hover over different points inside the code, it actually sort of shows you some of what's going on. It gives you like hints as to what's happening. But it hasn't executed any code yet, so there's nothing really to look at. So what I'm going to do is I want to execute the next line of code. Over here in the top right corner, you're going to see 3 buttons. Step into is the one you want to play with. Step into means execute the next line of code.
Okay.
So let's just stick with that one button. Just execute one line and go back.
Sure.
So I'm going to hit that step button, and now it executes. Oh, and of course it's asking me for a value because,
Okay.
of course, that command was ask the user for a salary.
I make $500.
$500. I hit enter, and I'm back in the code again.
Okay.
And the little yellow arrow here has moved to the next line because it's saying, I'm about to execute this line of code. Anything you want to look at? So what's neat is I can actually hover over salary.
I'm noticing something funny there.
Yeah.
I'm noticing the single quotes. Single quotes means string.
Bingo, yes. Remember we talked earlier when we first created our first numeric variable, we said when we said age equals 42, how does it know it's a number, not a string?
Yep.
No quotes.
Right. Okay. So it's seeing that as a string. Because that's right, because input returns a string. That's where things are going wrong.
That's right. The input function returns a string. So what it ends up with is it ends up with a string value for salary, a string value for bonus, and suddenly when you say salary plus bonus, it's seeing string plus string. That means concatenate them together and you get 50,075. Oops, not what we had in mind. So we can see, thanks to the debugger, we can actually see that, oh, we have a number that's being treated like a string.
That's not what we want.
It's not what we want. So what we need to do now is we're quickly going to go here, and we got this weird result that happened because it was basically treating it as strings. It was as if we had typed in a salary of 500 with quotes around it and a bonus of 75 and got these strange concatenated strings. So what we have to do is we have to somehow convince it that when it gets that result from the input statement to treat it as a number.
Right.
And the way we do that is there are functions that will convert from one data type to another.
Okay. And just kind of looking at that, those functions seem to match the data types that we want. So if I want an integer, I would just use int. If I want a floating, I would use float. Somebody else actually had pointed this out earlier, the str for string.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. So these are functions you can use to say, take this value, or the value in this variable, convert it into an integer, please.
Yep.
Take this value, convert it into a long, which is just a bigger integer value.
Right.
Any sort of whole number if it has no decimal places. Float converts it to a number with decimals, and string will take a number and switch it into a string.
Yeah. And actually, there's a couple of people that have pointed out that when it comes to doing something like this, this is something you run into constantly across all
the time.
languages. Because anytime that I put together a text box, or we're doing a command line, that by default it's going to treat it as a string.
Yes.
So that's what you've got back. Now you're going to try and do math with it. Well, now you've got that problem. Now the way that you're going to do the conversions will vary, but the fact that you have to do them, the fact that it's coming in as a string, that's consistent across all languages.
And and you bring up the point of, like, if you decide to start building websites or forms where users enter data, you made an awesome point. That's right. Typically, when a user enters a value in a text box and you ask for the value the user typed in, it's going to give you a string. So you're going to have to convert it to a number to do your math. So this is such a common scenario. It's annoying. And you know how we usually find out we have to do it? We run it, we get the error message, and go, oh yeah, I got to convert that, don't I?
Yep.
So all I have to do in my code, in this case, is I need to say, take the value inside, let's do a float here. Let's take the salary, convert it to a float. Let's take the bonus, convert it to a float. And now it should be taking a numeric value. It takes a string, converts it to a number, takes the other string, converts it to a number. So now I'm adding two numbers instead of two strings. So fingers crossed. Oh, hang on, I was still in the middle. I just did the editing while the code was running. Let's get rid of that breakpoint. I don't want that anymore. I just want to run my code. Please enter my salary, 500. Bonus, 75. 575. Success. So,
but I liked the old math.
You liked the other math, did you?
The old math worked out better.
Christopher would prefer it if we left that bug in the system. But just imagine the disaster it would be at a company. And it's a kind of thing, you might have had it in your code. It was off printing paychecks, and everybody's going, wow, this is great. Everybody at the company is really, really happy. Just because you forgot to convert a data type.
Yeah, you know?
So it's important to test your code is what I'm saying. You know, make sure the output is what you think it should be. Just because it runs doesn't necessarily mean it's doing what it's supposed to.
Yep.
Always take the time to say, well, if I type in this, does it give me what I think it should give me back?
Always test it.
Always test your code. It's not just knowing it runs doesn't mean it's doing what it's supposed to. It's really important to test.
Yep.
So in our case, to fix our code, we have used converted to a float instead of just adding salary and bonus, and now we're adding two numbers instead of two strings.
Perfect.
Now, I do want to bring up a little situation of, Christopher, what would you think would happen if somebody typed in a salary of Bob?
Well, it looked like you spelled Bob backwards, but anyway, so, you know, I'm guessing that what would happen is Python would look at it and sort of do what I would do, which is, what do you want me to do with this? Well, it's three letters.
Exactly. So if we go look at the slide here, you know, if somebody types in, I'm going to bring up the highlighter here quickly. So we've asked somebody to enter a value for salary, and then we take that salary value, and we've typed in Bob. So salary storing the value Bob. When we get to this line of code and it tries to convert Bob to a float, Python's going to choke. It's just going to go, I don't know what to do with this, and you're going to get some weird, nasty error message spewing all over your screen. So this sort of thing will happen. We are going to look at error handling later in one of the later modules tomorrow. So we will show you how you could handle that gracefully, because I guarantee you someday a user is going to enter something like letters where you only want numbers, and you don't want the code going and spewing nasty error messages to the user just because they accidentally typed a letter. You want to come back and say, excuse me, if you don't mind, could you please enter numbers only?
Pardon me.
We want to be polite to our users, and we don't want things crashing. So we will look at error handling tomorrow, and we'll show you some graceful ways to deal with those types of mistakes that users do things you don't expect, and we got to handle that. So the code would crash. So we've just done a demonstration of showing that data type. So now you have the information you need to complete this challenge.
Okay, so what's our challenge?
Your challenge
today, should we choose to accept it?
Should you choose to accept it, you are going to create a mortgage calculator. There's a lot of websites that do this online. And we have the formula. Your monthly payment is the loan amount times the interest of 1 plus I times number of payments minus 1. And it's this big, scary formula. But all you need to really know is that the user is going to enter a monthly payment. You're going to calculate a monthly payment. The user is going to enter a loan amount, an interest rate, and number of payments. And with that information, using the formula here, you're going to be able to return to them what their monthly payment would be. So that's your challenge, a very real-world problem. But hey, you may find yourself using this code to, calculate how much you can afford to buy that car or that house.
Absolutely, absolutely, fantastic.
So congratulations, you guys have now got the ability to solve mathematical problems using your code.
Start working with the numbers. Excellent. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of hungry.
You guys have been doing well. You've held up so well being here this long. You rock. Now, the good news is we've gotten through the long part of a day. After lunch is the shorter part of a day. We got through 4 this morning. We're only doing 3 this afternoon.
So what do you say we take a break for a meal?
I like it.
And we'll be back in about an hour. So we'll see you guys back here in about 60 minutes. 60, about an hour.
See you soon.
We'll see you then. All right, welcome back. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of full.
Yeah, I'm feeling much stronger. Got my energy ready to finish off the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. 3 more modules coming down at you, and we're gonna sort of, again, kind of continue where we left off. So we've dealt so far with strings. We've dealt with numbers. Now let's take a look at the last big data type, which is dates. And one little thing that's kind of worth highlighting real quick is, of course, there's a lot of other types of data and so forth that you could be playing around with and so forth. We're looking kind of for the big ones here.
Yeah.
So that's why we went numbers. That's why, of course, we went strings. And that's now why we're going with dates. And so let's kick into it. That's sort of the best way, I think, to get in and do it. So, fact of the matter is that we spend an awful lot of time dealing with dates, dealing with deadlines, dealing with schedules. In fact, while we were, eating, I was having to deal with a little fire. I have to have something done by the end of today. So you've got all of those different things. So you're frequently trying to calculate the number of days before a particular event, or be able to maybe highlight something before or after it's completed. So based on a project being due, is it late or is it on track? If I'm looking to book an appointment 2 weeks from now, so maybe like my contacts,
a follow-up appointment with the doctor or something.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, my contacts are 30 days. So I have to remember to pull them out after 30 days. So how do I go in and do something like that? Well, the way that we deal with all of that is by working with dates and times. And one great thing about Python, which is true across almost every language, is that it has the ability to understand and give you the ability to manipulate then a date. Yep. So let's say, for example, that, and this is kind of a classic example, that I want to figure out the number of days until my birthday.
Yep.
Now, in order for me to do this, the first thing that I'm going to need to know is what is today's date. And you'll notice that we can go in and pull that in by utilizing the date time class. Okay. Well, there's a lot that's going on here.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest questions that's come through the chat window is, can we create blank apps with Python? Can we create web apps? Can we create Windows apps? And the answer to all of those questions is 100% yes. You can create all of those. But typically, what all of those are going to require is some form of a library. So I'm going to need a library, so that way I can more easily make the web calls. I'm going to need a library so I can go off and communicate with a database. Well, we're going to need some component to be able to work with dates.
I'm just going to throw in one other library I just want to mention, because there was a couple of questions that actually came up on the chat window that were talking about things like dealing with other languages and currency symbols from other languages. Mm-hmm. You'll find a library out there, a module which contains functionality that help you deal with what we call localization. There's different locales called locale, L-O-C-A-L-E. So for those of you who are asking about how do I handle Danish characters, how do I show the euro symbol or things like that, there's a locale library for that.
Yep, absolutely. Actually, you can just draw it on the screen.
Oh yeah, that doesn't work so well inside Visual Studio.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I tried.
Even Visual Studio has its limitations. It doesn't have touch input for writing your code yet.
Shucks. That'll be the next version.
Yes.
Okay. In any event, so in order to incorporate that level of functionality, what we're going to need is an import statement. And import, in a nutshell, simply means take something and make it available. So whatever it is that it happens to be, we're going to take that, we're going to make that available. Now, once we make that available, what you're going to notice is that we immediately have access to then date time. So in fact, here, I think sort of the best thing to do is actually get in and do it. So
especially something like this. This is
exactly.
You want to see, and it is such a common situation that you just need today's date. So you can figure out how many days from now to another date, or it's just a display. How many times do you see a report or something, or you print someone an email that confirms, hey, you ordered the tickets and you ordered them on this date. We constantly need today's date. It comes up all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's take a look at my code here. I'm just going to say today, which is spelled like that.
You sure you had some caffeine? Maybe you should have had some caffeine.
Yeah, no kidding. Today equals, I'm going to say date time, date, oh. You're going to notice, a little error message here. It tells me right there, no completions.
So it's basically saying something, I'm confused.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't know what date time is.
IntelliSense, in this case, is actually telling you, I can't find it.
Exactly. Yep. And so this is kind of a very quick way to see, oh, wait a minute. And if you ever see something like that, where you type something out, you hit a dot, you're expecting IntelliSense, and you're getting like no completions, that's frequently an indication that you forgot an import. So now I'm just going to say import, and you'll notice that this will show me all of the classes that are available to me inside of Python. So I'm going to go ahead and say import, and I love anti-gravity. I know it's not really going to be, true anti-gravity, but wouldn't it be nice if we could start working with anti-gravity?
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, I digress. So let's go ahead and say import date time, and now you're going to notice the moment I do that, a lot of different things light up. And one big thing to keep in mind as you're typing something out inside of Visual Studio, if you see the color change, there's a reason for that. That what Visual Studio is trying to do is tell you that this is a keyword. So you're going to notice that today is, in that case, the little bit of teal.
I guess it is sort of a tealish blue. Yeah, it would be reasonable, yeah.
Periwinkle?
Yeah.
Sure. But whatever that color is, what this is trying to indicate to me is this is, at this moment, a reserved word or a special word, or this word means something. And anytime that you have a word that means something else inside of Python, you're not going to be able to use that as a variable name.
That is true, yes.
Yep.
So that's we didn't mention that in the rules when we talked about variables, but no, you cannot use a reserved word as a variable. You can't use print as a variable name.
Exactly.
You can't use input as a variable name because those have other meanings to Python. So
Yep.
today, and it's funny because today is just such a good example because it's the kind of thing you logically go, hey, I need a place to store today's date. Why not call it today? Unfortunately, not an option. Just have to come up with something slightly different.
How about, let's go with...
Usually you'll use current date.
Now, or current date.
I've seen now as a reserved word in some systems as well.
Yeah.
So I like current
Okay.
date. That's mine, but find your own. I think you're okay, So.
Why are you still giving me that turquoise? It shouldn't be giving me that turquoise.
You know what? They recently posted an update. I actually had somebody pop up a question on the Q&A saying, hey, my colors aren't matching what you have on the slide.
Yeah, and that...
There was literally a release 2 weeks ago to the Python tools for Visual Studio. And so we're running with that. So it's possible there may be a couple little small quirks in it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't stress over it. I said it was literally an update like a week and a half ago. So we're still getting used to the update. We only saw it a week and a half ago.
Exactly. All right. So in any event, so we'll go with current date, and then I'm just going to say date, and then we'll say today, and that will give me today. So I'm going to go ahead and one of the big questions that's come around is, when do I need the parentheses? And there's a couple of different ways that you can tell, but one of the easiest is these icons right here. So that little blue box that you see right there, what that's trying to indicate to me is a method, function.
A function. We talked about functions like print and input, these things that go do something for you.
Exactly. So that's going to need parentheses. So when you see a box, method, function, parentheses, and then on the blue ones, that's going to be some form of a property.
So those don't require the parentheses.
Those won't need it. Exactly.
Oh, by the way, when you zoom out, the color fixed itself now, by the way. So it must have been just somehow a screen refresh with that update. So
Yeah, that's sort of weird. Okay.
I think we just say new version of the tool.
Yeah.
Obviously, the colors don't refresh as quickly as they should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm not losing my mind
you're
there.
not losing your
All
mind.
right.
It's all good.
So we'll go with current date today, and then we'll just go ahead and print that out. So I'm just going to say print current date, just like that. And now let's go ahead and hit start. And sure enough, it prints out today's date as 2014-9-23. Perfect. Okay. So now what you're seeing here is how we can go off and grab today's date and how we can start working with dates and times. All right, let me get back to my slides here. Give this a second. All right. Now, we've already got it, the ability to store that into a variable, and you can kind of see that right there. There we go. And again, we see the output. We can see when the slide was created. So that was created on July 20th.
Yeah, you can see when I was creating my deck, yeah.
Absolutely. And then we've got our little demo slide.
Right.
Now, one of the biggest things that we're going to be looking to do when we look for a display or when we look to do calculations is to go grab the different components, the different parts of the day. And so you're going to notice that there's a whole set of different properties that are available on a date. Now, I've thrown around this word properties a couple of times. Let me go ahead and define this real quick. A property is, in a nutshell, an adjective. So whenever we're talking about whenever we're talking about an object, the way that I always like to try and describe things is picture a real world object. So here, let me hold up my little water bottle here. So you'll notice that I've got my little water bottle here, and my water bottle has a color, something that I could use to describe my water bottle. And so the color here happens to be blue. So property or adjective, color, the value would be blue. So in this particular case, coming back to the slide there, what you're going to notice is that I've got year, I've got month, and I've got day. Those are properties. Those are all different components or different adjectives, different ways that I could describe today's date. So I could give you the year, which is a part of that. I could give you the month, which is a part of that. I could give you the day, which is a part of that. And all of those are going to describe different pieces of information or different adjectives about that date object, in this case, the current date.
Unlike the functions. Functions are going off and doing something. These are just giving you information.
Exactly.
About that item or about that thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly it. So, and really, if I was going to go one step further, and I'm not going to dig too deeply into this, but when it comes to methods, I always like to call them verbs because those are the actions. So adjectives, give me something. Verbs, do something.
I like it. So functions and methods are like verbs, whereas properties are the adjectives. I like that.
Yeah.
That's a nice way of thinking of it.
I think so. I think so. Okay. So let's go in then and take a look at how we can access all of this. So let me fire up Visual Studio. And I'm just going to kind of keep on keeping on here. And let's just say print, and we'll say current date. And you'll notice again,
every now and then.
It's not going to give me my completions. That's all right. I'm just going to say month, and I'm going to say print and current date. And I'm going to say year, like that. And if I run this, it's working. Yeah. So, so we've got that, even though it's just not giving me the
problem is Python doesn't know until you're executing the code that current date contains a date value. So we have that situation where Python has a variable, current date, which we know is going to contain a date, but there's no way when you're writing the code for Python to detect that's going to be a date value. It's only after you've executed the code it gets a date, and that's why you're not seeing IntelliSense pop up for that.
Yeah.
So if you initialize it to a date value somehow, you could trick it into it, but that unfortunately is one of the things about dates.
And it's sort of true with Python in general. You see this actually in other languages. That Python, some people will refer to this as weakly typed. There's weakly typed and strongly typed. So when you declare a variable, the variable will always have a type, a string, a number, a date.
Yeah, it forces you. When you create a variable in some programming languages with strongly typed, it says when you make a variable, you tell me what data type is going to be in there and don't mess with it. It can only have that data type.
Exactly. But with weakly typed, which is like JavaScript or Python, you can actually have a variable and you don't have to tell it up front, this is what it's going to be, which means that I could actually take a number, throw it into it, and it would go, oh, okay, cool, I'm a number, I'm a number, I'm a number. And then you could, 3 lines later, throw a string into it, and it would go, oh, okay, I'm a string, I'm a string, I'm a string. And
it's great, it's forgiving,
yes.
It's flexible, but it gives side effects like, oh, the IntelliSense doesn't know what you're putting a date in there, so it can't give you the pop-up list of date functions, because for all it knows, you're going to want string functions.
Exactly.
So, like I said, pros and cons, it is what it is.
Yep.
We'll let you move on.
Okay.
So that just explains why you don't have the IntelliSense.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. So let's take a look at date formats here. And, I'm just pausing here for a second, so that way anybody in the chat window, because there's a little bit of a delay between us broadcasting and the chat window, but I just sort of want to put this out here to the chat window. So what date does 12/5/2014 represent? Or, I could have even done something even better, is I could have done something like 12/6/9. Or maybe, put zeros in front of that. So 12 whack 06 whack 09. What date does that represent?
So we have a vote here for 5th of February 2014.
Okay, so we have 5th of February. What else do we have?
That's the only vote in so far. We'll see if we get another one coming in. I can tell you, this is one of those interesting ones, though, because see, I went to a school that I was taught in French, and I was always taught it goes day, month,